Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sinai Temple's Torah classes. This class is called the Mitzvah of the Week. Just give me 1 second. We're just having technical difficulties on our phone. We'll start in just 1 minute. Apologize for the difficulty. So we're going to begin this evening by studying a mitzvah called Mincha, which is the afternoon offering. I'm going to speak for just a moment about the different services that we have. We have 3 services daily: Shacharit, Mincha, and Ma'ariv, the morning, the afternoon, and the evening service. And if you think about that, the question is why? And 2 answers usually come to mind. The first is it relates to the sacrifices. There was a morning, an afternoon, and an evening sacrifice. And we're going to get to that in a minute. Another answer is that each of the services, our daily services, they relate to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Vayashkem Baboker, he woke up early in the morning. What was he doing waking up so early in the morning? He was on the way to the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, and he prayed Shacharit. The second is Isaac. Yitzchak Lasuach Basadeh, he was having a conversation in the field, and what was he doing? He was davening mincha. And the third is Jacob. It says, Vayifka ba'makom vayalen sham, that on his way to the place where the Akedah, where his father was going to be sacrificed, he waited. And what was he doing when he put his head in the pillow in the evening? He was doing the evening service. But this Torah portion this week specifically, Vayikra, begins to detail sacrifices in a very, very minute way. And so I want to go through with you the mincha offering and perhaps shed some light as to why we have the mincha service, the afternoon service. We'll get to a little later of why it is the shortest service. But first, I want to read to you where the mincha, the afternoon offering, comes from. It comes from the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, this parasha, and it says, "V'nefesh ki takriv korban mincha ladonai." When a person offers a mincha, translated as mincha, and we'll get to understand what that means, a mincha offering to God, his offering shall be a fine flour. He shall pour oil upon it and place lavana, spice upon it. Usually, sacrifices are animals. So why is it that the mincha offering is not an animal at all, but rather it is flour and some oil? How could that be as special as an animal? You know, when we think about why we sacrifice animals, we do so because what is the distinct difference between an animal and a human being? It is that an animal does not have intellect and we have the ability to think. And so when we sacrifice an animal, and specifically we're sacrificing in order to atone for sin, when we sacrifice an animal, we realize that we must be better than that. That animal had no intellect. But it also shows us that when we sin, we too have lost our way. We have lost a little bit about our intellect as well. And so why a flour offering for the mincha? First of all, we'll talk about there are many more than just one type of mincha offering. But what was flour? And not flour like you pick in your garden, but rather flour what you use to cook with, to bake with. What was such an essential good in those times? Flour, Flour. It's someone's property. I think it makes sense over the last few weeks when we see these long lines at grocery stores, when we see people thinking about what are the basic necessities that they want in their pantry today. I think this idea of flour being a necessity, being our property, that if we had to give it up, today it would upset us. So when we give the mincha offering flour, we literally are burning a piece of what we need. Now, you might say it's not as powerful as sacrificing an animal, but it's powerful nonetheless. Now, that's one. Another reason that mincha is so special is called a tribute. It simply is a gift. It's not something that we need to do, but rather it is voluntary. I want to go through with you some of the different types of mincha offerings. I'll give you a sample list. They're in different categories. Some afternoon mincha offerings are brought by and for the community. And we know these ones. Right after Passover begins on the first night, we begin counting the Omer. That is a mincha offering. With that Omer, we wave it to God. The second is 2 loaves of bread on Shavuot is placed on the altar, not as familiar. And the third are 12 loaves, the lechem panim, that are placed upon the mizbeach on the altar on Shabbat. Now I want to begin to tell you the different offerings that are brought to you, that are mincha offerings, that are brought by private individuals. If I want to bring an offering to the temple, if you want to bring an offering to the temple, there are 9 different ones. Some of you may be familiar with, and others this may be new. The first, a sinner's mincha. I commit a sin, I bring an offering of flour to God. The second, the sota's mincha. You probably are familiar with sota. It's called the jealousy mincha. If you committed some type of act of adultery, you would bring this precious property of yours, flour, and it's called the sota mincha. Some of the mincha offerings also are related to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest that would serve in the temple. The Kohen Gadol would offer a mincha offering every single service that he led, and also the Kohen Gadol would offer a mincha every single day. So the Kohen Gadol would be offering multiple mincha offerings. Other types of mincha offering, which I think are just so special that perhaps we don't do today, but they were specifically for donations or vows that were fulfilled. And those would be great in a bakery. Imagine the names of these pastries on a bakery shelf. The griddle pan mincha, the deep pan mincha, or the oven baked mincha. Those 3, again, were all for the reasons of vows or donations, but they were baked differently. Have you ever been to Israel and you had a falafel in a lafa? Another way for saying lafa comes from the Bible, eish tanur. It means the fire of the oven. If you've seen somebody in the desert bake pita, not in an oven, but rather over basically a metal bowl, that's an eish tanur. Basically, it's a mincha offering. So my question is, why all the differences? There's only one mincha service today. Every single day we have the afternoon service, and it's in fact the shortest service. The entire service consists of Ashrei, which is a psalm, the Chatzi Kaddish, which separates the Ashrei to the Amidah. It's the Amidah with the Kedusha, and at the end, we have the Aleinu and the Kaddish. That's the entire mincha service. So why are there 9 different types of mincha offerings when there's only one mincha service today? The way that the temple was established is that some of the offerings were eaten only by the high priest, other offerings were burned, and some were eaten in their entirety. Another interesting fact about the mincha offering is that only one of these offerings was chametz. All the other offerings were not chametz, meaning they could be eaten on Passover. Which one had chametz in it? It was the one on Shavuot. Now I want to read for you from Sefer HaChinuch, the Book of Education, which is a 13th century book which details the mitzvot in order of the parsha. And again, we're studying the mincha offering right now because it is found in our parsha this week. How this was to be brought. It goes like this. The following is the procedure of bringing the mincha offering. Perhaps you want to go to your kitchen right now and find these ingredients. The synagogue is closed, so you can't bring it to the temple. But one day we'll bring it. A person brings fine flour from their home. in a vessel of silver, gold, or some other metal, and brings it to the Kohen in the holy temple. After the flour is prepared in accordance with the procedures, the Kohen Gadol brings it, the mincha, near to the altar, to the bima. The Kohen scoops and pomates a measure from it with the tips of his fingers and burns that entire thing on the altar. The remainder of the mincha is eaten by the Kohanim. This is the procedure of the mincha offerings that were to be eaten by the Kohanim. As for the mincha offerings that were not to be eaten by the Kohanim, as well of which the task of the mincha, you can read about it later. That's what Sefer HaChinuch says. So there was this procedure, right? Imagine there's a priest, there's a rabbi in the Kohen chapel, and you bring them the offering, and they sort of take a little piece of it, they put it on a fire, and poof, it's there. Now, I want to get back to distinguishing between an animal sacrifice and the mincha sacrifice that is so different because it is just flour. The first difference, and I think the prime importance, is that it's not just flour. We know that for a poor person, giving some flour and oil was just a great deal. It was a lot for them to do. A poor person didn't have the ability to find a cow or a sheep, but rather a poor person to go and find some flour. It was called self-sacrifice. They could actually participate in this ritual. And the fact that we said earlier that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, he too had to do it, I think it's a beautiful message that anybody from the Kohen Gadol all the way down to the poorest person could participate in the mincha offering for a variety of reasons. For a donation, for a vow that is to be fulfilled, or for a sin. Perhaps our intellect went wrong for a few moments. Another difference that I want to point out. An animal sacrifice, it's usually dealing with gut and blood and it's guts and gory. Last week, if you tuned in, we talked about Sefer HaChinuch, the mitzvah of washing our hands. And I said, very matter-of-factly, that the Kohen Gadol, if they were involved from one sacrifice to the other or a service to another service, they didn't have to wash their hands, even if there was blood on their hands, because they were always involved in avodah and service. But what about this? There's no blood around. It's simply baking. It's putting flour on the altar. How could that be greater sacrifice than animals? And the truth is, it is greater. Because the blood on the altar represents the soul of the human being. But when a poor person takes flour and oil and gives it to the Kohen, it's not that it represents the soul of that person, but rather the person has used all of their soul in order to do the mincha offering. Let me repeat that. It's worth repeating. When we have an animal sacrifice, a wealthy person can bring the animal. It's not any harm to them. And the blood on the offering at that time represents the soul of the human being. But when a poor person brings flour and there's no blood representing the soul of the person, we realize in that case, it is the entire soul of that human being that they bring to that offering. So let's bring it to today's time. I think so many of us have self-sacrificed. My own children during these last few weeks are saying, when can we go out to eat? When can we just go to a restaurant? When can we see our friends? Every day in online school, there's actually part of the day where they have to call somebody else. We know how much we have self-sacrificed. But we also know what happens when we don't self-sacrifice. Listen to any governor of the United States at this point, from New York to California, and they're saying the same thing. If you don't self-sacrifice, that will in fact cause harm to others. If you do sacrifice, even though it's difficult, even though it's lonely, we know that in the long run will be advantageous. And you know what? Just like a mincha offering, each one of us has the ability to self-sacrifice. It's not monetary based. It's not necessarily based on sin. When it's voluntary, that is that we want to do it. We have the ability to do it. And so how does this relate to, and I want to say one thing also. The mincha offering, we say it's reach nichoach ladonai. It has an appealing aroma to God. It smells good. And when you think about that also, it's not just that it smells good to God, but it smells good to us as well. When we give that mincha offering, we realize that it's the right thing to do. Now, how does it relate to the afternoon service? There are two different opinions. The first is that since the mincha offering is so small, well, as I said earlier, the mincha service is so short. It's just 3 prayers. Everybody can do it. It's simple. Perhaps that service is also voluntary, but that's a whole different story that we'll talk about in a different time. But the other, and I want to read this to you from Sefer HaChinuch, is this. The other is that the mincha offering, when does the afternoon service happen? It happens in the afternoon, at the time when we take a siesta, the time when we take a break. I know America is not accustomed to this culture right now. In fact, we are, but it also allows us to take a break. You take this, and if you've ever experienced a mincha service, it's very quick. In fact, remember at APAC a couple of weeks ago, there were thousands of people in the convention center, but all of a sudden off on the side, you would see a minyan, you would see 10 people davening. Or if you go on an El Al airplane to Israel, not now, of course, but you get 10 people, you have your minyan to do a quick mincha service. Mincha, I consider basically a service on the go. You don't have to put on your tefillin. There's no Torah readings besides Shabbat mincha, but again, that's a different case. You can do it on the go. Any person can do it. Most of our children are B'nai Mitzvah. They know the Ashrei, we know the Amidah, we know the Aleinu, and we're done. So to wrap up, I want to just recap what we've learned and also where we're going for the next week. The Parsha of Vayikra, and in fact, the entire book of Vayikra, it's called Torat Kohanim. It means the book of, or the Torah of Kohanim, because we basically took a break. We started with Exodus, we got to building the tabernacle, and all of a sudden, we are now reading for weeks and weeks and weeks the sacrifices that will be performed in that tabernacle in the temple in Jerusalem one day. But it's not just about the sacrifices that are going to be performed there. The question is, how is it relevant to our lives? And this afternoon, or now this evening, we've come up with several ideas. Going back to what I said in the beginning, it relates to the sacrifice in the temple, but that cannot be enough. We don't have a temple. It doesn't seem like we're going to have a temple in the near future. And even if you believe that there won't be a temple, why do the mincha offering today? But if you take the message of the poor person that gives the mincha, who says, I am going to give just something, then we can do that too. If that person can do it, in the rabbinic tradition, we say, kal v'chomer. I can do it too. I think it's a great message to teach our children. I think it's a great message to teach our neighbors. But most importantly, I think it's a great message that we need to teach ourselves. We can't rely on our neighbors to do that. We can't rely on our friends. It has to start with us. Because when it starts with us, and when we give that self-sacrifice, then our friends, then our neighbors, they'll rely on us to lead the way. On that note, you might have seen, and if you have not seen, Rabbi Guzik's message about Chesed, an amazing opportunity to participate in giving, in sacrificing. The question is, what will be your mincha offering today, tomorrow, and the next day? Join us in this Chesed opportunity. Go to Sinai Temple YouTube. It's youtube.com/Sinai Temple Presents. Listen to the message from Rabbi Guzik. See the email that was sent out. And participate. If you have the ability, help somebody else that is in need at this moment. That's what the mincha offering is all about. Not about an animal. Perhaps it's about some flour and oil. But it's about making each one of us just a little better tomorrow than we woke up today. Have a wonderful evening. We look forward to seeing you soon on Sinai Streams Education. Services this Shabbat on Friday evening will be at 5:45 from our living room, Rabbi Guzik and Rabbi Sherman, and Shabbat morning at 9:30 with Rabbi Wolpe's sermon message being followed at 11, all here on youtube.com/Sinai Temple Presents. Have a wonderful evening.